Welcome. In this video I'm going to be replacing the trailer wiring junction box on this 2021 E17 escape hatch. Now as I say, I'm not an expert. I don't know if the person who did this at the factory was an expert. I think this looks terrible. I think there's a better option here. So I'm going to be installing this junction box. We'll get into this in a bit, but if you do find this video helpful and you want to purchase one of these or any of the other accessories I use in this video, I'll put a link below in the description, and if you use that link it helps me out a little bit and doesn't cost you anything extra. So this is a 4-inch junction box like you'd find in a house. When I first bought the camper, there was actually a wire sticking out under it and it was clamped in there. It was not a question of if, but when it was going to short. So the first thing I'm going to do is inspect this and see what I'm dealing with, and then we'll probably take this wire off. I'll take it into my bench and wire it into the junction box, and I'll bring it out here, mount it, and then wire the trailer wiring into it. So I'll take this cover plate off, and we can see the wires are just jammed inside here. This looks pretty terrible. I'm going to try and loosen up this clamp here that's holding the trailer wire on. It's a little dirty in here, so I'm going to spray in some QD electronic cleaner. That'll help see some of these colors, I think. Now the back of this box has a wiring diagram on it. It may be hard to see. You can also find these online. It tells the different colors of wires and what they're for. Now the trailer wire, this big thick one here, probably is the correct color. It may connect to other things that are not that same color, so keep that in mind. So this here has lots of things going into it, so that would likely be ground. And right here is the first victim. I found a loose blue wire, and that goes to a trailer brake. It may have been in there enough to make it work, but I'm not completely sure. So I got this assorted shrink wrap. It has some different colors. I'm going to go through and I'm going to disconnect some of these just to get started. Like the blue here has 2 blue wires and a black wire. I'm going to shrink wrap some blue on there, and I'll only do that if there are no other blue wires. And I'll do that for the colors that are kind of unique. That way I can separate those things out and I know what they connect to. So it may be hard to see, there's a lot of shadows here, but this black wire going to these blue wires is to the emergency brake. So I just cut a little bit of the shrink tubing. I'll stick it over the end, and I am going to cut this back, so I'll put it back a ways, and I'll melt that on there. That shrink tubing's almost a little loose. Now I'll pull this wire out. Yeah, and that's sliding off of there, but it will mark it. You could also use some masking tape or something. Now this orange wire is going to the positive. Now on a battery, red is positive. On a trailer, that's the left turn signal. So I have to make sure I don't mix those things up, although the left turn signal wire is going to be a lot thinner than a positive battery cable. So this green is the tail light. I'm going to put the shrink tubing on it. There are some other green wires in here, but I'll know the shrink tubing one goes to the trailer wire for the light. The red is left turn signal. I don't know if I mentioned, but I most definitely disconnected the battery before doing this. Okay, so I had this orange from the emergency brake. This green goes to the battery, and then the other black was for the trailer, 12-volt auxiliary. So that's the 12-volt that comes from the vehicle, this one here. So let's see what we have left. We've got brown to brown. I don't have any brown heat shrink tubing. The brown is the right turn signal, but there's only one brown there, so it's easy to figure out. Looks like the last one we have is white. So white is going to be ground here. There's a lot of ground, so I'm going to try and get this out of here and put it back together. And there's corrosion in there. Okay, so I think that's everything on the trailer cable. So now I'll try and get this out of here. Okay, this is held on right here with this clamp. So I'll unbolt this, and this whole thing should come loose. We can head down to my shop and we'll get this wired up. Okay, we're at my bench. So let's get this open. So there are a number of different junction boxes available on Amazon similar to this. They look like they're from the same mold. I went with this one because it's yellow and clear, so you can see inside of it. So if there's water in here or corrosion or something, you can see it. Now this will probably fade over time, so I'll probably still have to open it up, but I thought this would give a little bit better visibility. Here we have the user manual. This does have a chart for the colors and what they're for. Here are the instructions. You can pause and read through those. So let's get this open. So the tip of each of these studs is color-coded. It's also written on the terminals. Then we have these grommets here that we can take out. So one of them already has a hole in it. So that would be the one you'd use for your trailer wiring. So this looks like it can be mounted either way. It looks mostly symmetrical. I think I'm going to mount it like this with the wire coming out this side for the trailer wiring. So I'll feed all this wire through this grommet. Might be a little tricky. I could cut these ends off, and I'm going to eventually. And that will fit over there. And this will fit down like so, and there's a clamp that will go in here. It's in this bag. Now this bag also has some more grommets with holes, so you could poke individual holes in these, or drill holes, because these are hard plastic, or you can use these big ones here. Now I do see a yellow wire in here. That's for the reverse. I don't have reverse hooked up, but I'm going to wire that in because maybe I will do that someday. So I'm going to pull this out until there's enough room for the yellow to hit the reverse lights. So I'll cut a little bit of this insulation back. I'm going to do that carefully with a utility knife. I want to make sure that I don't cut into the wires themselves. So I slit down here, and that can help me cut this the rest of the way around. So before the yellow we have black, so I'll need to cut it back, and we have white. Let me think this through a little bit. Okay, I'm going to cut a little more of this back. Now I'm cutting the trailer wiring back. I do have some slack. If this was just the correct length, you need to be careful about that so you don't fall short. Now you can get new trailer wiring if you do run into a situation. So to connect up here, we're going to be using some ring terminals. I think it will be, these are 5.5, seems to be a good size. So this kit I have is the WireFi shrink connector kit, and it has 3 different options here depending on the wire thickness. So for the thicker wires we can use these, although that's the wrong terminal size. Oh, they're over here. Oh, they're kind of mixed in here. Okay, so these will all fit on these terminals, but these are for 22 to 16 gauge, these are 16 to 14, and these are 12 to 10. So I'll be picking through these to get the right size ring terminals. I'm going to start on yellow here. This seems pretty thin. I'm guessing maybe this is 16 gauge. I'll try and strip some of this back. I think this is 12 or 14 gauge. Okay, so this is actual 12 gauge wire, and this is smaller, so I'm guessing this is 14. So either of these terminals would work, although I found a different size one. So I'm going to twist this a little bit. I'll twist this as I'm putting this on here. I want to get all the conductors inside, and that's actually not fitting, so go with the blue. Okay, so that fits in there nicely. So I'll check my fit here. This is ultimately going to fit on about like that. So I'll crimp that down. So I'm going to be using these crimpers. Now this is the insulated crimper right here in the middle of the plier. Let's see how we do here. Seems like a very good crimp. Now these ring terminals also have shrink tubing with glue, so that will seal them. Now I need to get something to loosen these up. Looks like 5/16 is going to be the correct size. So put the grommet in, I'll line this up, now thread the nut on. Okay, now most of these I'll take back off to wire up the other circuits. So that's on there now. I'm going to see if I can put this clamp on here. I may have to take it off. So when you're tightening these clamps down, you want to make sure you tighten them evenly so they press evenly against the wire. So you can see this is off here a bit, and this is kind of angled. I don't really have it started well, but I'm going to bring this off to the side. I need to put some downward pressure on it because there's no threads cut in this plastic. Okay, we have that in there tight. So I'm going to repeat this procedure to hook all these other terminals up. So I'll speed up the video as I go through that process. Okay, we have this all wired up. Now this did not come with bolts. To bolt it to the trailer, you need to supply those on your own. This was pretty straightforward. One concern I have is if there's going to be enough room in here. There's easily enough room in here for the turn signals and the parking lights and such, but there were a lot of things connected to the positive and the ground. So I may actually break that out into a separate terminal block. I'll figure that out when I get on the trailer. But I think right now, this is a lot more organized than what we had on the trailer. Okay, we're back out at the camper. So these wires here are trailer wires. This is the trailer brake, and then these are ground grounds, and then we have this wire here. This is 8 gauge, and it's just passing through the box. So if we look over here, this is a positive terminal block. It usually has this cover on it. I've taken it off. And this here is going into the box in here. It's going into the box, connecting up here, and then coming right back out. So I'm not completely sure what that's going to. That may be power for the camper. I'm going to see if I can trace that. Okay, so that's the 12 volt that goes into the power converter from the battery. I'm actually going to be moving my battery inside, but I don't know why this is like that. It's almost like they didn't have enough cable to run to the terminal. So I'm going to pull this off. The connection on there is terrible. And I will deal with that later. At a minimum, I'll get a butt splice and crimp a butt splice on there. But there's a good chance I'll just replace this whole cable from the power center to the battery. So this black here is also 12 volt that goes to that terminal block. I'm going to pull it out. I'm not sure why that's so big, because the 12 volt from the trailer is not that big. So what we have left is grounds, which are all these white ones, and that came right off obviously. So I'll pull these out. So that's our trailer brake. This ground is tied into the box, and the rest I'll pull out of this box. Now there's all this spray foam here that's just flaking off. I should be able to pull this box off here now. So these are self-trapping bolts. They can be kind of a pain to remove sometimes. One of them was going through this grounding lug, and the other one was going straight into the box. So I'm thinking the new box will go down here somewhere. I do need to make sure that these wires will reach, so I'll route these through here. I'm going to go ahead and cut the ends off of these. So these grounds don't seem like they're going to fit very easily. If I mount it over here, that might work. Although I still have to get a big ground wire in here to ground everything. So I am thinking a separate grounding block might be a better option. So in that case, I'll probably mount the box here. I'll wire up the trailer wires and then run wires for my ground to a separate terminal. Okay, so it's the next day and I ordered this terminal bus here. It has this cover that goes on it. Now this is not completely waterproof. It's open, but even the positive terminal post on this camper is open. Now this fits on with these kind of rubber grommets. I'm going to throw some zip ties on here. There's a little bit of a gap in the back when I mount it, and I'll zip tie this down when I'm completely done. It'll be kind of a belt and suspenders approach. So this box I'm going to mount here. There was already a hole here, and I'm actually going to angle it down to the right just a tiny bit, and I'm going to drill a hole in the bottom here in case any water gets in, then it can drain out. So I'm just going to drill, it's a 3/32 inch drill bit. And the bolt that was in here is 1/4 inch by 14 by 1 inch. So there was one there, I got a second one. So I also put a butt splice in this 8 gauge wire that's going from the battery to the power center, and I put some shrink tubing over it. I'm going to replace this. I just did this for temporary use, but I really don't like having a break in the wire there. It's kind of unnecessary. So I think I can screw in this one side, maybe not all the way, but I'll get it started. I'm just using an impact driver with a 3/8 inch socket bit. For the other side, I'll take a cold chisel and I'll mark the hole location. So on this side, it's not flush with the bottom. It's maybe 3/16 of an inch up from the bottom of this frame. On this side, I'm going to make it just about flush. So it's just ever so slightly tilting down. So I'm going to drill a 3/16 inch hole, and I almost don't have enough clearance here. I'm using a compact drill. Now I could just drill a hole and put a nut and bolt on here also. Okay, that seems to be secure. Over here there was a clamp that was holding the cable. I'll route it back through that. Now this is dipping down a little bit. We don't want this to be up where water will flow through it. So you would call that maybe like a drip loop. And this clamp also had the emergency brake wires going through it. Okay, and it doesn't look like that clamps it down very tight. So I'll pull these ground wires out of here. I'm only going to be passing through the positives. So now we have these negatives, so I'll have to mount the negative terminal bus. So that will probably go right around here somewhere. To mount it, I have these smaller self-tapping screws. Okay, so I have it started in there. I'm going to slip my zip ties behind it before I snug it down. Okay, so I have that on. So now I'm going to crimp on connectors on each of these. I'm not going to film all this. It will be similar to how I did it when I did it in the box, and I'll come back and I'll sum this up. Okay, so I've made a lot of progress. I have all of the trailer wires wired in. I ran the ground from here over to the ground bus, and then I have a grounding lug here on the other end. So this grounds it to the trailer, this grounds it to the trailer wiring, which would ground it to the tow vehicle. Now this is way larger than it needs to be, I'm sure. But this green cable was actually a power cable, which is the black one. So this is auxiliary power. This is power sent from the tow vehicle to the trailer. I didn't hook that up to anything. I'm going with lithium batteries, and I don't want to charge my lithium batteries directly off of this. So eventually I will connect this up to a DC to DC charge controller. That's my plan, I think. But for now, there's nothing on this. This is the reverse lights here. And these next three are for trailer lights. So we have left, right turn signal and the parking lights. And then this last one is for the trailer brakes. So these two wires here are for the emergency brake. So this one, it's kind of yellow and orange. It looks like maybe it's faded. That was hooked up in the original terminal box, if I remember correctly. That I've hooked up to the positive bus. So this has this cover that normally goes on, and I need to put that back on. And I've wired that up there. The other one is going into the blue, and then there's also blue from the trailer wiring. So the blue from the trailer wiring is when you press on the brakes, it sends power to the brake wire, and then this one is sent power if the trailer detaches. So that's all of the trailer wiring here. Then if we go to the neutral bus, I have the neutral from the trailer wiring here, and then this is the trailer brake neutral, or ground, not neutral. And then these two come from inside. I'm not completely sure. That might be for solar and something else. And then over here is my electric tongue jack. So I added an electric tongue jack. I didn't have it permanently wired. I had been wiring it up to the battery, but now I have it on the ground block. Now the positive from the tongue jack, I hooked up to this fuse lead, and I put a 15 amp fuse in. So I think that's the right size. So what do I have left to do? This is the 8 gauge wire that goes from the battery to the power converter. It's hanging down here. I'm just going to zip tie this up temporarily, and I'm going to shorten it and or replace it, because I'm moving my battery in. Now, if I was leaving the battery out here on the tongue, I would just shorten that up and clean that up a little bit. So I'll put the covers on both of these. I'll put the zip ties on there. I'll screw this on. I'll replace this cover. And then the battery can be connected now with this ground and with these positive terminals. So one of these, this one here, is for the positive bus. This one goes into the inverter, which I've actually removed temporarily. And this is the negative from the inverter. So I'll put these covers on, I'll zip tie that up, and then I'll finish this up. Okay, so I think I'm finished up for now. So having gone through this, what are my thoughts? Well, I think it was almost prettier before, but this is much more organized, and I feel like this is going to be a lot safer. I found multiple things wrong here. Some of them were definitely safety issues, and I fixed those things. Now I do have some more wiring I want to do. As I said, I'm going to be moving the battery inside under the bed, and it will be a lithium iron phosphate battery, so I need to get all that wired in. So some of these ground wires may go away, and I may eventually terminate these shorter and run them in the top so they're not looping down. So that might clean that up just a little bit. Once I get this completely figured out, I'm probably going to put some sort of a terminal protectant on these lugs here to keep them from corroding. But the way this is now, if I have my left blinker not working, I can take this cover off and I can check the terminal for the left blinker with no problem. Now I will be connecting this up to my vehicle and making sure everything works, including the left right turn signal, the lights, and most definitely the trailer brakes. So is this a DIY project? Well, if you've done automotive wiring before, I think you'd be able to tackle this. If you're not familiar with wiring, I don't know if that you'd want this to be your first project. It involves a lot of crimping, so you'll want to hone your crimping skills. Now I really like these wire-free terminals. They crimp really nicely, and then you can shrink the insulation with the glue so it seals out moisture and other contaminants. And I like to think that if the crimp for some reason came loose, it would kind of hold it together, at least temporarily. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. Now, if I were designing this box here, I would make it quite a bit bigger, and I would put a ground bus in it. I think that'd make it a lot more useful. So that's all I'm going to cover in this video. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. If you like this video, please click like. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I'd appreciate it if you could do that. And thanks for watching. Until next time, goodbye.